Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Second Act Show. I am John Tarnoff,
And I am Carrie Hannon.
and this week we are the Johnny Cash and June Carter of Second Act Careers.
All right.
Give it a little bit of a twang.
Yeah.
So this week we are very pleased. I'm going to jump right into it because we have our friend Chris Farrell on the show. And I'm just going to do a quick intro on him. Chris is our unretirement champion. He kind of coined the term unretirement in his book of the same name that came out a few years ago. He has a new book, which we're going to be talking about. I'm not sure, Carrie, how you and Chris know, but he and I first met in connection with unretirement when that first came out. And it really, I think, shifted the paradigm to a certain degree towards this area of the Second Act that we're all talking about. So Chris is a senior economics contributor for Minnesota Public Radio. You may also know him from his work as a regular contributor to Marketplace and many other outlets. His byline appears in Bloomberg, New York Times, Kiplinger's, other publications. And we're just thrilled that he has carved out a little bit of time to talk with us today. And without further ado, here is Chris Farrell coming to us from, I understand it's a radio station, but it does look like some kind of yacht control room.
Yes, exactly. But it's Minnesota Public Radio. It's a studio here. And I did carve out some time. It's an absolute pleasure to be
Great.
with you two.
Great.
Always going to say
Great.
yes if I get that chance.
So I wanted to just do something before we go any further, and that is to talk a little bit about Carrie's book, In Control at 50 Plus, which has come out recently and is phenomenal. And for those of you who have not yet read it, I just wanted to do a great plug, because I think one of the things that is so wonderful about Carrie in her books is that she writes a lot of them, but they are always up to date and really comprehensive. So there's so many nuggets in this one that completely surprised me and delighted me, and I just wanted to just put that out there for everyone to go and buy it.
Thank you.
I would agree. And can I add something to this, which is that, one of the things that we've all been talking about is, what's going to be the impact of remote work and how is this going to affect people? And in Carrie's book, you have one of the most important discussions that I don't think still has gone out into the broader discussion enough yet, which is about the implications this has for experienced workers who want to continue to work but may not want to commute, or the physical demands of commuting may be too great, and that this remote work really does open up a lot of opportunities for the experienced worker. And I think Carrie really nailed it in this book.
Absolutely. And I think that gets us into this question of unretirement, which I would first of all like you to explain the term, how you came up with it, what you were observing, and whether this is about coming back from having retired, or whether this is about looking forward and saying, I'm not going to retire.
And I would think, Chris, also...
You're going to love this answer.
I was just going to say, Chris, based too on what you see
both.
the last year, coming out of the pandemic after the last couple of years.
Yes. So, to your question, John, it's really both. And, the term unretirement, we're all seeking for a word, because the word retirement just isn't right. It's an incredibly powerful word that has a very short history. You think up until really the post-World War II era, the early part of the post-World War II era, hardly anybody retired. That was for the wealthy. They had the resources, they had the money, they could retire. Most people worked pretty close to when they died. And then you had this emergence in the post-World War II era of retirement with Social Security. A lot of companies were offering defined benefit pension plans to their workers. You had cheap land down in Florida. And this image of retirement has restayed here, even though it's a relatively small section of the population. Don't you think that actually pursues that? I work, I stop working, and then I'm going to live for 20 years, 25 years in leisure. in full-time leisure. That doesn't capture much of what's going on in our society at this point. So but we still use that word retirement. People who are retired that have 3 or 4 jobs will still say that I'm retired because it's part of our discourse. So unretirement is the signal, the time of year, the time of life that you're in this, second half, last third of life. It lets people know you're talking about experienced workers, you're talking half of life, but at the same time, it doesn't imply that you're just embracing full-time leisure.
So it's really a hybrid kind of situation in terms of, you're not stepping away, you're not stepping back.
You're not stepping back. So, you're using terms second act, there's encore careers, there's all kinds of terms. What I like about the word unretirement is that it sort of signals, and John had asked, is it for people who are looking forward, they never planned to retire, or is it people who retired and decide to go back to work? And I think it really is both. That there are more and more people, and Carrie, you've written about this a lot, more and more people that as they work as a social institution, and you have all this skill, and you have this knowledge, and you have this experience, and we all at our core want to be useful. That may be one of the most important imperatives, as a human being, is that you want to be useful. And so the concept that you're just going to reach this arbitrary age, and then you're going to say goodbye to all that skill, all that knowledge, all that experience, and that community of people is not that attractive to many. And so some people may just full-time retire because it kind of takes time, as both of you have dealt with. It takes time to figure out, what do I want to do next? Then you got to convince people to hire you, all kinds of things like that. So you may do the full-time retirement, or you may plan ahead and just sort of move from your career into something else. But it's this notion of staying engaged in the workplace, staying engaged in jobs, and continuing to use your knowledge, your skills, and your experience.
And part of it, Chris, isn't it, what you just said, is planning. If you think you want to continue with something, you really need to start at 55 thinking about what you might want to do at 60, or, give yourself the time to kind of play out some scenarios, right?
Absolutely. If you think about retirement and, what has been the most of the coverage of retirement, it's saying, do you have enough to live on? Right?
Yeah.
It means you have enough to live on in the retirement years. And that's what most of the conversation is dominated by. And I'm not knocking the money. Finances is important. Having savings really matters. You have a retirement savings plan, it's great. But what I want to emphasize is, we know that. But what we don't spend enough time is thinking about, what is it you want to do next? As you get older, I named one of my books, my last book, Purpose in a Paycheck, and you mentioned that, John. Most people say they get older and, we don't have that much retirement savings, kids are expensive, life is expensive, who knows why, all kinds of reasons, most of them pretty good. So if you continue to earn an income, that really helps your financial circumstances. But at the same time, you don't want to just be working to earn an income. You want to be making a difference. You want to do something that you feel good, something that says, hey, I want to get up in the morning and do this. And as you can see, I'm of an age where, and I love this, young college graduates will say, can I talk to you about careers? And, just have a coffee. And the thing about, they know what a job is, but they want to talk about, but what is this career thing? And there's a couple of people who knew that they want to be a lawyer. They want to be a doctor. This is what they want to do. But most people, you fumble, you stumble, you kind of figure it out. And so we have these wonderful conversations. So they want to earn an income. They want to be independent, but they want to do something where they're making a difference, where they feel good about what they're doing. Now, the exact same conversations with people who are 60 something. It's about, I want to have an income, but I want to be doing something that I'm proud about doing. I want to leave a legacy. I want to make a difference. And the only difference between that 20-something and that 60-something is that the 20-something thinks time is infinity. And the 60-something thinks, well, I got a little shorter time here.
Not as much runway, but you still have it.
So Chris, are there best practices that you're recommending, or you've seen people do when they're in their, let's say they're in their early 50s and they're looking ahead and thinking, okay, I'm seeing the horizon. Uh, how do you get into this purpose of planning for a more meaningful, more purposeful life and career?
Okay, so I'm, relying a lot on the work that both of you have done over the years. And, I think the most valuable asset that anybody has when they're at that stage of life where they're thinking about what do I want to do next, their most valuable asset is the network of people that they've known over the years. And that can be family, close friends, colleagues, former colleagues, church, temple. And to think about your network, and we'll just use that term network, although sometimes people rebel, or think about your connections. And your connections know you. And so, really, what I think one of the best research approaches you can take is to tap into your network. And you're sort of saying, you're asking them, what do you think? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think are my skills? Because one of the things that's really hard to do is to separate your job from your skills. Those are not the same thing. And if you're thinking about making some kind of change or some sort of adjustment, maybe going from the for-profit sector to the not-profit sector, or trying something that's just a little bit different, you really want to be focusing on your skills and not your job title. And the other thing is we all have our self-delusions. And you may think that you are this incredible empathetic person, and your friends may look at you and say, you are a wonderful person, but empathy, that's not your strength. You don't want to put yourself in that kind of a situation. So they're going to give you that kind of feedback. So, and then, and John, you've written this about, just take 5 minutes a day to write, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? Who are you? What are your values? What are your goals? This will never be published, never be seen. Don't worry if it's grammatical. You don't need a period. The grammar police are not going to look at it. But it's like taking 5 minutes a day, which is like nothing, but it adds up over a period of time. So that's your interest, part of your sort of introspection.
Right.
But it is this working with your people that know you, that you know. And of course, you're probably doing the exact same thing for them, which is wonderful. It's a mutual conversation. It's not a one-way conversation. But I do think that is one of the strongest answers to the question you raised.
But Chris, isn't it also kind of this mindset? I think a lot of people think, they make a decision, then they've got to go do that. Whereas it's not like your primary career. You might do something for a little while. Nothing's forever. You might try out a bunch of different things, do a portfolio of things, right? So people get stuck in trying to replicate something that doesn't exist.
Right. And yet you want to have this experimental mindset. And it's almost like an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
So your last book, Carrie, was about, the midlife entrepreneur and, starting their own business. And, that's not, as you wrote, that's not for everybody.
Right.
But it's that mindset about if you were going to start a business, what would it be? And it's being experimental and trying different things out. And the other thing is, as you try different things, you meet new people. And then those new people then lead you into perhaps, maybe I want to talk to this person and see what they're doing, or talk to this person. So you're always adding to your experiences. And so it's not, it's you still have, what is it, Joseph Coughlin says you have 8,000 days. So you have time to be experimenting, and you have time to be trying things out. And so I think it's very important what you just raised about being willing to make pivots, to be experimental, to have almost sort of an entrepreneurial bent, even if you're not going into self-employment or entrepreneurship, and have that sort of mental attitude.
Well, Chris, you've met some really interesting people who have, quote, unretired. So can you tell us one or two examples of some of these interesting stories of people who have kind of embarked on this?
I just did a story about a really interesting man and his wife, Scott Newcomb, and he's been involved in social justice for a long period of time, and on the faith-based side, social justice, and to deal with racism, and his wife is Anishinaabe, and and she's done a lot of work with Native tribes, and so they were in Minneapolis, and they've had this life, but they had in the back of their mind that they always wanted to own a small farm. And they looked and they looked, and realizing probably not going to, it was never the right combination of price and where it was and everything like that. And they were in northern Minnesota and they were visiting their son and they saw this ad for a farm that was for sale. I think it's like 25 acres. And they went and visited and they are now farming. They just made a bid right away and they're now farming. And I said, so do you know anything about farming? And he laughed. He said, no, my doctorate is in theology. And, but the finances work. But what was really striking about it was when you look at his social justice work, the theological work, her work with natives, is they were doing very different things now farming in the way that they were farming and organic and the land and the stewardship. And yet the purpose was very much the same. And the purpose hadn't changed. The way that they expressed purpose was different.
Mhm.
And so and when I talked to him, I started laughing because
Mm.
he was building the beds for something that they were going to be planting, but they were so that when he was 80 years old and his wife was 80 years old, they didn't have to bend over. So see, that's
Right.
thinking ahead, right?
Yeah.
So
That's definitely. I think it's interesting that the point you make, I think, is very relevant. That it's not about necessarily making this marked shift or right turn from what you've been doing when you decide in your 50s that you're going to unretire or second act or encore career or whatever that's going to be. And a lot of people will say to me, I feel like I have to make a big shift. And the only alternative for me is to make a big shift. And I say, it really doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I think your example points to that this is a deepening of the purpose that these people have already been expressing over the course of their lives.
And that makes me think of something that I wanted to add to your earlier question, which is this is probably like 15 years ago, and a person came up to me and said, hey, I think what I want to do is own a fourplex. And they were about in their late 50s, early 60s. I think I want to own a fourplex. I think this is what I really want to be doing. I said, okay, that sounds good. Have you talked to any landlords? No. Do you have any experience? No. And it was like, go talk to people who are doing what you think you're doing. And my experience, and I'm sure it's yours, 98%, 99% of people will talk to you and give you some information. Every once in a while, there's someone who will say no, but you don't want it. That's fine. Don't focus on them. Talking to all the people that will tell you what it's like to be a landlord. What are the advantages of being a landlord? What are the disadvantages of being a landlord? Go to the landlord meetings. They're happening all the time. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, but it's, whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you think you want to do, somebody's doing it. More than one person is doing it. Go talk to them. Say, hey, what's it like? I have this image that this is what your life is like, or this is what the job is like, or this is what that part-time work may be like. And ask them. And think of that as it's a lot of gathering of information. As you mentioned, Carrie, your things may not work out, your twist, but that's all part of gathering information. That's all part of your research. And so talk to people who are doing what you think it is you want to do.
Yeah.
And you can learn so much. And some of your romantic ideas will disappear. Some of it may turn out that you were right. That, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
But you also can find
a lot of this, I think, is about beginner's mind, about the idea of don't bring the assumptions of your old life into your new life. All right. Think about this as an opportunity to learn something new, to have a new attitude, to kind of start again.
And I like that. And one of the things, Carrie, off of what both of you are reminding me about is you want to be planning ahead always. But a lot of times what happens is we're busy. You're busy in your job, you're busy with your life. And people need to take a break. And whatever organization you work in, it has a certain code of this is smart, this is dumb. This is, of course, you would do this. Why would you do that? And I think a lot of people need to break away from where they are and take some time off and think about where it is I want to go. And they have to get away from people who are telling them, why would you do that? Oh, oh, no, you wouldn't want to do that. That's not That's not sensible. Now, there are things that aren't sensible to do. I'm not denying that. And when I asked to Scott Newcomb, I said, one of the easiest ways to lose money is to be a farmer. I mean, that's a long time, accurate, statement that's out there, truism that's out there. But they had it set up in a way that they weren't going to. But I do think a lot of times people do need to take a break. They need to get away from the colleagues and the organizations and what an organization thinks is smart, is so that they can think more about, well, what about me? Or what about my family? Or what about my community? What's smart there?
And it's also, I think, being open to invitations, Chris, because like you can lay the groundwork by researching in different areas and so forth, but you have to be ready when something comes along that it sparks you. You kind of are open to new ideas. I think a lot of us get closed down in what we expect of ourselves and what others expect of us, and we're afraid to reach for something a little off that path. It's scary to leave the lane.
It's very scary to leave the lane. And so, yeah. And the other thing is, back to one of the most important things about work is that it is a community and that people do care. I mean, at a very basic level, people care that you show up, and they'll make a phone call if you don't show up. And it's gossip, and there are people you don't like, and there are people you like, and you get the gossip, and that's the lifeblood of a lot of organizations. And I think one of the problems that many people have with retirement is they don't have a community outside of work. And so part of this unretirement is making sure that you're grounded. It's not just that you have a purpose, not just you have a reason to get up in the morning, but you also have people that you like being around and people that you like working with. And that we can all be lonely on the job. We can all have some social isolation on the job, but boy, it's so much less than the kind of isolation that people have when their world starts shrinking and they're not out there and they're not engaging with different generations and they're not having to learn a new software package. I had this wonderful experience with an airline, and actually it was a wonderful experience with the airline. I'd made a mistake and I called them.
You had a wonderful experience.
I had a wonderful experience with the airline.
Amazing.
It is. And I called them up. I said, I made this mistake and it could have cost me a lot of money. She was really nice. She said, hey, that's okay. We'll fix it. And they said, but it's going to take me a while because they change our software every 6 months and we have to learn how to use this new software every 6 months. And I thought, your brain is working. You're learning new software every 6 months. And we complain about that thing, but the thing is just what you were saying, Carrie, earlier. It's about curiosity. It's about learning. It's always about learning. And so anyway, yes, I did have a good experience with an airline. And one of the people that I interviewed, she had been 30 years out in Southern California with a construction company. And she had become the person that they sent to conferences to talk about construction and sustainability, the environment, and she loved it. I mean, she was doing it for about 10 years. She'd been in the industry for about 30 years, but she woke up one day or one year, really, kind of like airport, hotel, airport, hotel, airport, hotel, and it had gotten just not very exciting or fun. And so I went to this program, the University of Minnesota mid-career program, where you try and figure out what it is you want to do. Wonderful wonderful people run it, and she decided that what she wanted to do was work for an airline. And she went to her first interview, and it was a total disaster. And she went to her second interview better prepared. And she's the one now when you go to the airport and there's a problem. She's the one that gets called to deal with the problem. Wow. And she loves it, absolutely loves it. Now, as she said, she never thought she would like this. She never thought this would be a career, but she's around all kinds of people and she's dealing with people. And yes, she's still in an airport, but it's a very different kind of environment. And again, she has that ability to communicate. She has an ability to talk to people, but she didn't imagine at all that that's what she would end up deciding upon, working as the troubleshooter for an airline in an airport.
And it's having a great impact.
Great story.
That's good.
Yes.
But Chris, how do you see, since you started in this area and this sort of talking about unretirement, really studying the economics of it and so forth, how has it changed? I mean, what as the boomers have been moving through the pipeline, is it now it's a little more people get it? It's no longer you're an outlier to be wanting to unretire to do something different, right? Or what are you seeing out there?
I think the change has been dramatic, and I think we underestimate how big the change has been. Um, I mean, so what would it have been, Carrie, 20 years ago? Forbes, Business Week, we all were writing articles about early retirement. That was the gold
Yeah.
standard, was early retirement. How can you retire early? And you don't see those articles anymore. I mean, every once in a while, one will emerge, but I think the change has been really dramatic, and the biggest change that you're seeing is despite the fact that employers are really slow to change the way they behave, really slow, way too slow. The fact of the matter is they are making changes, they are making some adjustments, and this is not a bizarre conversation to go to somebody and say, can I shift to part-time work or can I go to phased retirement? You might be rejected. They might say, no, we're not going to do that. But you're not coming out of the blue
Yeah.
and just hitting them in the side of the face with complete shock.
Right. It's
So I
becoming
do,
more accepted.
it's becoming more, we haven't institutionalized it. You know, it's
Right.
not like when you retire from a company, and if you're lucky enough to work at a company with a 401k, you know, they hand you your 401k packet. There's very few companies that have said, well, you know, here's an alternative. Here's our phased retirement packet. Here's our semi-retirement packet. And if you still decide you want to leave, here's a packet that will help you start your own business or find a new employer. Okay, we haven't institutionalized it that far, but this is a conversation that we're having. And I think really 20 years ago, outside of a few pioneers like Ken Dykewald of Age-Wave and a couple other people, it was a very, very um, really the tributaries of society. And now this conversation has moved to the mainstream.
Is it the longevity?
Yeah, very
Is
much
it that
so.
we're aware that we're living longer, or what do you see as the sort of propeller of it?
So I think there are like 4 or 5 things that are propeller. One is we're living longer on average. We're better educated. We're healthier on average. And it's easier to think about work in today's world because, you know, it would be one thing in the 50s and 60s when smokestack America dominated. And, you know, the notion of working longer in a steel factory or in a mine, I mean, that's not
Mhm.
attractive to anybody. Um, but the notion that maybe you might shift to and work in a clinician's office or work in the back office of a mutual fund company or, you know, do something that's more tied to white collar work or tied to more office work, less physically outside. And even with many blue collar workers, you know, the shift that they're finding is teaching
Mhm.
apprenticeships or mentoring or passing on their knowledge. So they're not being as physically engaged as they were before and as physically demanding as it was before, but they're still using their skills, their knowledge, their experience. And then the other thing, which is what we carry, I know you've written so much about, but the fact of the matter is we don't have a very good retirement savings system. And Social Security only replaces so much income. And so really, there are just so many people have reached that stage where the notion, this conversation is out there. Can you live off your retirement savings for 30 years? That's about as long as someone's career
Mhm.
is 30 years. And so the notion that you're going to be able to work and save for 30 years and then live off your accumulated for 30 years, even if you thought that was a good thing, even if that was desirable for you, it's impractical. So even if delayed by a few years, it can make a real difference in your standard of
Yeah.
living.
Yeah. That's a great note as we start to wrap up. And I think it segues into the question of your most recent book, Purpose and a Paycheck. So, would you talk a little bit about that before we go?
So one of the things that came out of this book in Purpose and a Paycheck was something that I'd kind of realized and I'd written about a little bit in my previous book on retirement and written some articles for Next Avenue and read Carrie's articles. But really, if you go back 20 years, the notion of somebody 60 years old starting their own business, that was just like crazy. You wouldn't do that. I mean, and people would say, don't do that. You know, so many businesses fail, you know, it's just not going to work. And there has been this dramatic shift, partly because of technology, partly because of skill and knowledge in this more white collar world. But actually, for many, many people, it makes sense to start a business, to be self employed in this sort of last stage of their career. It's an incredibly exciting period. And the amount of money that is committed, it's very little. And typically your office is the home, or it's maybe a co-sharing workspace, which are coming back now. So that's good. And so one of the things that came out of Purpose and a Paycheck was both in the nonprofit world and the for-profit world, there was this fundamental economic shift in that it made sense for more and more people to contemplate self-employment and entrepreneurship in the second half of life. And I think when you think about the dynamism of the economy, and the innovation in the economy, this is incredibly important, that this is where a lot of our economic growth can come from. The most undervalued asset right now in the US economy is the older population, because we still have this notion of decline, of frailty, that you're not creative, that you can't be innovative. And we can come up with books and examples after examples, but it is still a powerful stereotype out there, and it is so deeply wrong. If you're creative in your 20s, you're creative in your 60s and your 70s. There's no question about it. So it's about changing our society in ways that allows this to flourish. And I think entrepreneurship and self-employment is actually in the vanguard of this.
You're on a roll, Chris.
I'm so inspired. Everybody got to read this book for sure. Their Purpose and a Paycheck, really. If you like what Chris just said, read the book too, because it really, it's a double whammy. And I'm thinking that's it. I mean, it's exactly it. That the world has changed, the technology. I mean, you just captured it, and your work really helps people figure out how to do this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being on the show this week. And before we go, I just wanted to alert our viewers that we have a great show coming up in 2 weeks, where we're going to be interviewing Guadalupe Hurt and Barbara Brooks of Second Act Women. Carrie, do you want to say something about Guadalupe or Lupe and Barbara?
Yeah, well, these two have started a terrific organization in Denver, focused on women over 50, over 45-ish, looking for their next act, what they're going to do. Either starting their own business or going back to work for an employer. But the two of them started this, and it's a network of women. They do a lot of help with, all kinds of things, helping prepare for the job search, prepare to start your business, giving you a network. But they too face this sort of ageism, genderism, and lookism in the job market when they tried to find jobs over 50. So I think they're great. That what they're doing is tremendous, and they have some really good stories to share with us, I think.
That's great. And after Lupe and Barbara, we're going to be having Tim Driver from Age Friendly Employers and Retirement Jobs, who's phenomenal. And then we've got a whole bunch of other people booked with us through the fall.
June, and then, of course, John, soon you and I will start singing at the end of the podcast, I think. I hadn't heard that.
June song right, you want to start now? I could be your
I had not heard that. I think I have to check with my agent before we can agree to that.
We'll have to get the rights to the music.
It alters the terms of our arrangement.
Anyway, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to our show today, and thanks to Chris for joining us. And we'll see you all next time.